24-hour news live from the Russian capital. This is RT International. My name's Ewan O'Neill. Good to have your company. Our top story this hour, a deadly terror attack on buses helping to evacuate a number of towns in Syria, which killed as many as 80 children on Saturday, has been widely condemned by humanitarian organisations. The UN has called for greater protection for children right across the country. The huge blast targeted civilians waiting to leave rebel-held areas after a deal was struck between the government and opposition forces to allow people to flee.
There are so many dead here from the Free Syrian Army, also civilians, women and children. It's a horrific picture that just can't be described.
This is one of the worst, most horrifying massacres. We urge our President, Assad, to help our families out. What happened can't be described. Oh dear God, we don't know what to do.
Those people were stuck in rebel-held territory waiting to be evacuated to government territory when an explosion went off, just at the same time when many children were gathering around a van that was distributing potato chips. You have the accounts of refugees from Fua and Kafrea who were at the scene at the time who say that rebels sought to maximize the casualties on that day by luring starving children to that van. Back in December, one of the buses evacuating civilians from Fua and Kafrea was also torched, and rebels at the time warned the world that they would do the same again if they tried to have civilians from Fua and Kafrea evacuated again. The evidence of who was behind that attack has either been dismissed or downplayed by the mainstream media. Even the deaths of those civilians, those children, has been trivialized by the media.
We have since heard that the evacuation process is continuing despite this, you would say, hiccup but disastrous moment in it, punctuating it.
Meanwhile, just a few days before this attack, the darlings of the mainstream media, the Oscar award-winning White Helmets, were seen protesting this deal that was supposed to see civilians from both Fua and Kafrea and rebel-held territory evacuated to alleviate their suffering. Yet we haven't seen that video being circulated or being published by the mainstream media. So yet again, we're seeing double standards on the part of the media when it comes to how they handle evidence of who is responsible for horrific crimes in terms of how it fits their agenda.
Well, these are pictures taken just minutes before the attack. The buses were believed to have been transporting up to 5,000 people, mostly women and children, from besieged areas. And here's a picture showing a professional war photographer on his knees, devastated after seeing the horrific aftermath of the attack. Following the tragedy, the Syrian government wrote a letter to the UN Security Council calling on the fight against terror in Syria to be made a priority. We spoke to journalist Martin Jay, who posted that picture you're seeing about the bus massacre.
A whole load of really awkward, difficult questions have to be asked by journalists, have to be asked by the White House and Pentagon and Trump's people, which is what exactly is the relationship between the Trump administration and these groups, these opposition groups who are responsible for these massacres, like al-Nusra or others in that area. You know, those are the sort of questions which journalists aren't asking and Trump isn't prepared to answer. But that, for me, is really the core of this issue. You know, every geopolitical expert or journalist in this part of the world knows perfectly well that al-Nusra and other extremist groups are funded indirectly by the West via Qatar and Saudi Arabia. It's nothing new. That feeds into the bias, that feeds into the sloppy journalism. by biased Western media, and also by the various administrations, not only just in Washington, but also in Paris and in London.
Well, speaking of Paris, hundreds of people gathered in the French capital over the weekend to rally against the National Front Party and their presidential candidate Marine Le Pen ahead of next Sunday's election. Mass protesters hurled rocks and smoke grenades. The police responded with tear gas.